Local Conference of Youth South Africa 2024 webinar. Thank you all for taking your time and joining us this evening. I hope this event will be both informative and very eye-opening to you as the youth of South Africa, Southern Africa. This year's LCOY is organized by Climate Action Network South Africa, short SACAN, and Climate Action in collaboration with Global Shapers Community Tshwane Hub and the African Climate Facility Project. LCOY is an initiative by YANGO, the youth constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which provides a platform for young people to engage in climate negotiations and policy making. Right now, we're seeing we're seeing a lot of young people. We're also witnessing an urgency in addressing climate change, and young people are at the forefront of the crisis and are uniquely positioned to drive innovative solutions. So it is the primary aim of today's webinar to introduce the key elements of LCOY South Africa, which focus on finance in South Africa, the just transition and renewable energy. This will inform our LCOY statement on youth position and the just transition. So thank you all for being here and your commitment to creating a sustainable future. We look forward to your contribution. So on the first point of the agenda, we're going to have an address from the LCOY working group. We're going to receive a message of support from the LCOY working group. They'll give us a brief introduction and what they're all about. So over to the LCOY working group.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be in the world right now. Dear LCOY participants, dear organizers, and dear speakers present today. In the name of the LCOY working group, I would like to welcome you to this local conference of youth specifically, but also to the LCOY community more broadly. By attending this event, you are joining a global network of youth who already are or currently becoming advocates for climate justice. So thank you so much for attending today. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for sharing your energy and your knowledge with each other today, but hopefully also beyond that. My name is Fabiola, and I have been a member of the LCOY working group for the past 3 years, and I'm very honored that today I get the opportunity to speak to you a little bit more about the work that we've been doing to support youth worldwide. If you're attending this conference today, you might be wondering, how can I influence global climate change negotiations? Well, you're not the only person. There are thousands of youth worldwide that want to become involved in climate advocacy, and that's why they joined YANGO. YANGO is the Children and Youth Constituency to the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We're one out of many civil society constituencies that want to make their voice heard at international climate negotiations. YANGO has over 10,000 individual members and over 1,000 youth organizations and NGOs that are members. And you might be wondering, who classifies as a youth? We classify youth as anyone under the age of 35. So if you're interested in getting involved, go ahead. YANGO has multiple working groups. There are some working groups that work on specific topics or themes, such as renewable energies, human rights, action for climate empowerment, or how to reduce inequalities that are caused by the climate crisis. Then there are also operational working groups, such as the group taking care of communication, social media, the website, or the group that is organizing the global conference of youth taking place every year. And as you can see in the list, the local conference of youth, the local COY, are also part of the operational working groups. This was just a very short overview over what YANGO is, but if you're interested to connect with fellow climate advocates from all over the world, I would encourage you to become a member of YANGO. By subscribing to the email list, you can always stay up to date on what the working groups are working on right now and what actions are happening worldwide. And you can, of course, also follow YANGO through multiple different channels, such as Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. But you might be wondering, I'm at a local conference of youth right now. What does that even mean? And local conferences of youth more generally are local events with a regional national focus that empower you to participate in climate action and decision-making processes. And because all those local conferences of youth are events by Yango, they are also officially endorsed by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat. And because I remember when I started getting involved, I found it very confusing. All these abbreviations, all these different events that are taking place. So I'm going to break it down a little bit for you here. As you might know, the Conference of the Parties, also known as the World Climate Conference, takes place each year. And because we as the global youth want our voice to be heard there, we meet right before the Conference of the Parties at the so-called LCOY, or Global Conference of Youth, where we come together and make concrete policy recommendations and demands that we want to be heard on the international stage. But because, of course, not all youth can come together at that event in the place or the location where that conference is taking place, we organize local conferences of youth. And those are basically national events that bring together youth to think about the topics or the issues that they care about, the justice demands they have, and then to put them into a youth statement by their country, which is then brought to the Conference of Youth and included in a global youth statement that aims to represent the voice and the demands of youth from all around the world. So why are LCOYs important? There are 3 pillars to LCOYs, because obviously our objective are youth in order to take climate action and advocate for climate action. So local conferences of youth are supposed to provide capacity building, network building among youth, and also policy building. And this can have many faces, because of course every local conference of youth is different, because there are different topics that are relevant in that national or local context. So you might be talking about climate adaptation or about nature-based solution, maybe about mitigation or climate finance. And that's the exciting thing about LCOYs. There's something for everyone. And I'm sure you've already looked at the program for your conference today and have thought about what you might be interested in.
All right, thank you for that. I hope that presentation was insightful, and then it will encourage you guys to take up to be more involved in Yango, and so that your voice can be heard on a global scale. The youth are at a position where their voice can be heard. We're seeing what's happening right now in Kenya, where the youth are the ones driving change. So your voice needs to be heard out there. So I hope this presentation will encourage you to be more active, especially in the climate action space, and be more active and put your voice out there and be heard. So the next point on our agenda is an overview of LCOY 2024. So Ms. Mutiehi Mafandiri, LCOY SA 2024 contact point, will give us a brief overview of the objectives, activities, and expected outcomes of LCOY 2024. So over to you, Mutiehi.
Hi, everyone. So lovely to see so many people in the room. I appreciate that it's 5 p.m. and you managed to join. We did select this particular time slot because we wanted to ensure that those that might be schooling during the day are available to attend the session in the evening. My name is Mudie Mafantiza. I'm a Research and Policy Officer at the Climate Action Network South Africa. And as Gamo has mentioned, I'm also the contact point for this year's LCOY South Africa. The objectives that we have as the Climate Action Network South Africa, the Global Shapers Community Tshwane Hub, and the African Climate Reality Project for this year's LCOY are to prepare youth for the just transition. When we look at South Africa's just transition, and as a member of civil society, and also as a former academic, having followed this process, we've seen that there's a gap really where youth are concerned in the just transition, which is contradicting the information that the IPCC recently reported, stating that Gen Z and Gen Alpha will be the generations most affected by climate change, meaning that the just transition should be something that is most relevant for youth. It is a space in which youth should be considered primarily, and a space in which youth should be empowered to contribute to. And that is what we're trying to do. We would like, through this webinar, to introduce our key themes of climate finance, the just transition, and renewable energy. All of these things really intersect and all come together. And so we hope that at the end of this webinar, and at the full completion of our processes for LCOY South Africa this year, we're able to produce a youth position on the just transition. This would be our South African local statement. As you heard previously from Lola, from the LCOY working group, all LCOYs produce policy statements. These policy statements are critical because they represent the voices of youth, and they are then considered and rather included in the global youth statement that Yango, the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC, presents to negotiators and the UNFCCC themselves at the Conference of the Parties. So this webinar is very important, and I hope that you're able to feel comfortable enough to participate actively in the Q&A. We encourage you to pay attention. We encourage you to make use of the chat, but we also encourage you to remember that this is supposed to be a safe space, and we'd ask that you are kind and considerate of other people. While you may have different views, perhaps you disagree with the panelists, let us all be considerate and kind towards one another. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the rest of the program. I hand over to Kamohelo.
Right. Thank you so much, Bidyehi, for that overview for LCOY 2024 South Africa. Moving on to the next point, we will be hearing a presentation on youth and just transition, on the youth and just transition from Ms. Bugera Zimande from Power Future Lab. She will discuss the role of youth in driving a just transition towards sustainable energy. So just to give a short bio on Ms. Bugera Zimande is an independent consultant and a PhD candidate at the Power Future Lab based at the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business. Her research focuses on distributed energy resources and power sector transition, with a special focus on the democratization of South Africa's electricity system. She has over 10 years of work experience as a climate and energy professional involved in research, capacity building and communication, project management, and policy development process in South Africa, Kenya, and India. Bugela is a social and intersectional justice advocate and contributed to and led related projects within civil society organizations. She is committed to the pursuit of inclusive and progressive work, presenting contextual and intersectional solutions to development challenges in society. So Ms. Bugela, over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Kamohelo. A good evening, afternoon, wherever you are, to everyone. And thank you for this opportunity just to speak on a topic that I am not only interested in, but really passionate about, and excuse the cliche, because often we use the word passion quite loosely, but I mean, it's literally in my lifeblood. I qualified as a microbiologist, but I've never worked in that sector because I think at the time that I was starting to be exposed to environmental issues, I think we were at a cusp where there were a lot of engagements and buzzwords like climate action. And I think that sat with me, you know, coming from a rural village that, you know, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change. And so when we were speaking about climate action, it actually resonated quite strongly with me. And I wanted to add just that part, you know, adjacent to my professional CV, as you might call it, just to really say that climate action and climate-related climate and energy work for me is really a personal one, because we see it in our communities as well. So I'm going to share my screen and take you through the presentation that I've prepared for today. So firstly, I think because this is a meeting for the youth and by the youth, I wanted to sort of pitch this or present this in a way that it encourages us, but also really drills in why our role in this space is so important and so fundamental, and why our leadership in every process is crucial. I think Kamohelo mentioned, just like what we've seen recently in the news and what's happening in Kenya, it's not new that the youth are leading critical, envelope-pushing conversations and are delivering the change that we so desperately require in our respective countries. But even outside, or maybe at a lower level from a country level, that within our spaces of influence, that there's so much that we are yet to do and can do. And so even when our voice is being poo-pooed or we're being labeled as too aggressive in our approach or too passionate, that we shouldn't be disheartened, because we know what has delivered the change. So I titled this presentation Youth and the Just Transition because I was asked to speak on that. And also on speaking on the topic of the just transition, wanted to also, like I said, encourage us together that within the topic of just energy transitions, there's always the call to action, which is towards inclusive energy transitions. I mean, my background is in renewable energy and with a specific focus on energy democracy. And at the heart of energy democracy, or democracy itself, is inclusion, and the youth are at the core of that as well. And so as I speak to this, it's not only saying we need to carve out spaces for ourselves, but we need to include ourselves in the conversations that are ongoing, not sideline ourselves, and actually take charge, take ownership, and take up the positions within our communities, within our workspaces, to ensure that we deliver. We're also part and parcel of the transformation and the solutions that are coming about. And when I speak about inclusive or inclusion, especially when it pertains to just energy transitions, I mean, just energy transitions are a buzzword right now, and you can get as many definitions as you want. But the principles of justice, the principles of democracy and inclusion have remained the same from the beginning of time. And we need to always circle back to those. So within my presentation, when I speak of inclusion across the value chain, specifically when it pertains to just energy transitions, I consider us being involved in the ideation of Thank you for that.
Piri, may I ask you to mute? Okay, sorry about that. You may continue, ma'am.
No worries, thank you. I speak about inclusive processes, and to confine it, of course, because it's within the context of just energy transitions, and within our South African context, or actually within the African context, that has purely focused on electricity. And we all know that our electricity systems have been largely monopolistic, have been undemocratic, been centralized, and have been driven or rooted in high carbon, fossil fuel intensive industries. So as we're transitioning away to less carbon intensive, more decentralized, more democratic systems, that we ensure that inclusion of youth voices and all of those that are marginalized are centered. From ideation to planning to policy reformation, and especially the establishment of institutional transformation. So, I mean, it's undeniable that our energy future rests in the investment and deployment of renewables. I think that is no longer in question. We know that climate action is necessary, and it is necessary now at this point. As a matter of fact, we are far delayed in the pace and the extent at which we are transitioning. However, when we think about just energy transitions and only look at transitions or transitioning a system and forget the just aspect of it, we are not delivering the transformation that will be required. And my very first point, and the 3 points that I'm going to make throughout this presentation, is that as we are transitioning, the old, unjust, undemocratic systems of power will not yield the transformation that we require. And what I mean by that is that we know the financial models that have kept our old and outdated energy systems in place. We know the institutional frameworks that have kept those in place. We also know the voices that have been louder in the rooms and the spaces that are negotiating either policy outcomes, policy processes of the old and outdated system that has proven to not be beneficial and not for the greater good. And so when we're doing an overhaul, when we're speaking about transformation specifically, we need to interrogate very closely the foundations of the modality that delivers us to that place. Otherwise, we'll just be stuck with a transition that is not just, that is not democratic, and still leaves a large majority of people behind. And so as power sectors reform and energy transitions are underway, and I mean, all of us can attest, our countries, our politicians are negotiating all sorts of things, often without us in the rooms and without us in the spaces, and often with our ideas being poo-pooed or processes being termed as too technocratic. It's always really just surprised me that whenever we speak about medicine, for example, there's an understanding that our health, you know, even if you are at home, like the way that you take care of your health, anyone can understand it from the time that you know, you can make sense of situations. But when it comes to energy, we're always told that energy is complex. Yes, it is, in a sense that there are systems that none of us can see, that when I switch on a light bulb, most people often don't understand the processes that go into place, but that often highlights the need for us to actually do more work and bring about an understanding. It doesn't say that it's impossible to bring an understanding of energy systems and processes into the hands of people. You know, we're probably the most creative generation, and actually going to increase as years go by. So we can no longer hide behind lack of education, which is a fair statement. We can no longer hide behind there are no opportunities or avenues, you know, when we are using applications at every day, you know. I mean, the fact that we're actually able to meet from across Southern Africa or Africa at this time, at this point, and be able to view my presentation and me present to you is testament to that. So with power sector reforms and energy transitions underway, and also considering the intersectional crisis as a backdrop, because it is the political economy of our societies that often determine the depth and the extent of our policy processes and outcomes, we also need to factor those in. And I'm going to speak about that a little bit more towards the end of my presentation. It is crucial for us to center inclusion. It's crucial for us to think about fairness and to think about equity. And I think when I started this presentation, I said it's for the youth, you know, to encourage us to be more involved, not because we are seeking solutions solely for the youth. We're seeking solutions that are going to be beneficial to the greater good, but we also understand that our role is paramount. And carving out our space is also quite important, that our inclusion is an inclusion of the next person as well. And so we need to do this by seeking out the opportunities of transforming these incumbent systems. And when we think about the incumbents, we think about who holds the power, who holds the material power, who holds the financial power, who is negotiating our financial contracts, who's negotiating the loans that are coming into our countries, who's owning the electricity systems. I think it was easy to see in the traditional electricity systems, but as we transition to more decentralized systems, and we're seeing specifically in South Africa, which is where a lot of my research is based, we're seeing high income homes being able to buy solar technologies at a far accelerated rate compared to the average South African. I think this holds true to a lot of our African countries. We're seeing companies and the CNI being able to hold on to material power at a faster rate than any of our communities could afford. And that is one entry point for us to actually interrogate even further. Why is it so? You know, it means that the systems of power and those who hold economic power, even within the transitions, are still the ones who have a better chance of moving along in the transition. And even just by saying that, you can already tell that that is not just at all, because we need to be meeting the energy needs of the people, especially those who need energy solutions the most. So for future energy systems to be just, we need to interrogate the injustices of these incumbent systems, ensuring that they do not carry over into the next system, which is this just energy transition that we speak about. And this can only be delivered through transformative policy processes, which includes deep engagement and mobilization. And in a sense, this is what mobilization is. It's us gathering together, sharing resources, building capacity in areas that we do not fully understand, by identifying where those gaps are ourselves and seeking out that information. It will be very rare that that information will be handed over us. And again, that's us taking up our space and understanding the power that we hold as the youth in our respective spaces of influence. And again, upholding justice, upholding equity objectives and goals which are defined and are well understood, which then will deliver the deep contextual view of these pre-existing injustices that I spoke about in the previous slide. Sorry, there's a bit of repetition there, and my mistake. So once we have a good understanding of those processes, we will start to see how the programs that are designed as policy outcomes will begin to be shaped in the way that we would like them to be. And I think that's so important. I think out of everything that I've said in the last couple of 2 minutes is that when we think about transformative policy processes, we think about deep engagement, the ultimate endpoint is delivering programs, projects that deliver the outcomes that we seek as a collective. And then the next question, I'm sure after listening to all of this, is what is the role of the youth really within this bigger politicized? I mean, a lot of the negotiations are happening at these political levels, and perhaps our entry points are our organizations. But I think beyond the policy institutional lens, there is a need for the youth, for the participation of the youth to increase, for ownership to increase, owning processes, owning the material features of the new systems that we speak about, and also holding or increasing the power and the role that we play in decision-making. We know that decision-making basically equates to power. And I'm going to present a tool that has been very useful in a lot of the work that we do around energy democracy. Again, thinking of the fact that we talk about this technocratic space, but I think over and above it being very technical and it being very difficult to see, is that the spaces that we work in, when you look or when you consider the transition in the electricity sector, is that there are these political, social, and economic systems that also are at play. And so I propose the political economy analysis as a tool to identify some of the hard set pillars that are often very resistant to change. So even as this transformation is going on, to ensure that justice is actually at the core of it, that equity, equality, and inclusion is at the core, these are the three monsters that we need to tackle. And some of the ways that you can actually go about looking at this, I'm not going to share this resource, this is from a working paper, is we understand what ideas do, you know. So when I come up to you and I say that I've got a solar system and it's been working perfectly, and I tell my neighbor who's basically has been going out without electricity, and they see the benefit of the solar system, there's an idea that is being shaped there, and there's an ideological shift where it's like, it's not only electricity from ESCOM in our context that can deliver the change that I want to see, but here's someone with a solar system and it's working. We've seen it working for over a period of time. They're making X savings. This is how the kids are benefiting at home. This is how the community is benefiting. It's an opportunity for an ideology to be shaped. And what we see often in like traditional power systems is that interests and incentives are hard set, in a sense that it is the interest of a few that have been served. Thinking of the CNI and how systems are established, that there was a close alignment to the mineral energy complex and ESCOM, for example. There was an interest within the mineral energy complex, which ESCOM could meet. And so they were incentivized, ESCOM was incentivized in a way to basically provide to big power users at the detriment of others. And I know this is very simplistic in the way that I'm presenting it, but in the way that that was shaped, it sort of shaped the power association to power, because those whose interests are registered higher, are prioritized, they have closer relations to power, whether it be de facto or de jure power. And with their power and influence by power, think of, you've got influence, you've got economic power, you've got buying power, you can then influence the institutions. And by institutions, we look at the rules of the game. So think regulation, think of the Municipal Financial Act, for example, everything that basically sets the power into motion, that is well written in our regulation, and perhaps the rules that guide how electricity is bought, who has the power to buy and sell electricity, and then that feeds back into ideas. And as the youth, I mean, as I've presented that we need to increase our participation, increase our ownership, we also need to increase our role in shaping these ideas, because ideas are usually at the entry point of these 4 features. So our ideas, the innovation that we can bring, I think sometimes we ourselves undermine the power that comes from being able to take a solution, ideate it, create it, share it, and see that bring about a shift within these hard-set pillars. And I think sometimes we get inundated with, it's so hard to break through into this very big space and this very big sector where big words are used. And, you know, it's the older people that are having these conversations. But I just want to encourage us that there is power in the ideas that we bring, because it is clear that ideas are a key moving bit. I mean, we call this the political economy diamond, that ideas are a central or are a focal area within the political economy diamond that we can enter through. And it also helps us to identify who has the power now, and if we're wanting to shift that power, how that can be shifted. I'm going to move on from there and then just go into my last 2 slides. So moving on from there, so once we've identified who has the power, we've identified the power that we have, or even the end point, is that we start feeling these gaps and start moving the levers of change. For example, this can be through engagement. It can be innovative ideas, like I mentioned before. Is engagement never ceases. The more that people know, the better. We need to ramp up our capacity building within this specific space, and for us to actually identify the areas that we feel we lack in. We also need to start exploring a little bit more the local interpretation of what this transformation is to look like. So when we speak about a defined just energy transition, what does this ultimately mean for us? What does it mean beyond our organizations? What does it mean for you as an individual? What does it mean for the communities that you come from? And I think when we start doing that, we start to get to the core of how the transformation will begin, and we start grouping the people in, the people that can actually benefit more strongly from this transformation. And then we also spotlight the shared social gains within the new electricity systems. I don't think this is spoken about enough. We speak about it at high levels, that when we're changing these monopolistic utility companies, there will be social gains, and often those are assumed. But what does it mean? Are we speaking about microgrids that are socially owned? Are we speaking about microgrids where they're owned through cooperatives? We actually haven't done enough ideation. And through all of the research, even in developed countries, we haven't seen well-developed pilots of what it looks like, what true community ownership looks like. And even more important for us in Africa, where we've seen how communities can band together and how responsibility can be given to communities, and even a voice be given communities in such a way that they start owning the solutions that are intended for them. Just a continuation of us filling the gaps and moving these levers of change is to explore impactful ways to facilitate bridging conversations. I mean, I recognize or identify this as an effort to facilitating these bridging conversations, including the underserved and underrepresented. We are speaking English, we can all understand each other. What about those who cannot or do not have access to the platforms that we have? What are we doing beyond our spaces of influence to ensure that we're bringing those voices, the voices of the youth, in this context, who are not part of these conversations, who cannot join the bodies or the communities that we speak about. And then the last point is policy interventions. There really needs to be more collaborative policy contributions, submissions, especially knowing the gaps and the omissions that we see, even at the subnational levels in our society. And I say this knowing that I've worked in civil society organizations, and sometimes there is a tendency to isolate that we are focusing on this and solely this, and we forget to meet each other within the gaps. And I think that's where a lot of the magic still exists. And as the youth, I think my encouragement is that we begin to extend our hands a lot more. We begin to share more freely without overthinking jurisdiction or what might be venturing into somebody else's arena. We understand that the climate crisis is affecting all of us, some more than others. And the more that we share, the more that we hold hands, the more that we extend our hands to each other, even in just understanding the basics, the stronger we are. And so my final slide, just to highlight the most important three things that I hope that this presentation highlighted. I know it's probably not sufficient because the just energy transition is an ongoing conversation, and it is a moving vehicle, and we're trying to latch on these things that are super fundamental, the concepts of inclusion and democracy, adding or advancing the democracy perspectives is going to be foundational, but also understanding the political economy within which these transitions are taking shape, identifying the gaps and the omissions within our national just energy transition plans, finding possible solutions where the youth really can have impact, and having clear practical entry points. And I think what I put on in my presentation is that our ideas have not been explored enough. It's easy to say, this is for the youth must think about this. What about the youth saying, have you thought about this? And I think there's an opportunity for us to do a lot more, especially considering just like the technological leadership. You know, a lot of the change we're seeing now, our transitions are led through technology. It's through the advancement of these decentralized renewable energy technologies, through technology and internet. And there's so many untapped opportunities for us to play there. And then just to collaborate a little bit more, as I said in my previous slide. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that very informative presentation, ma'am. I think what we can take, what you've stressed a lot is that the youth need to bring out their ideas. They need to speak up. They need to be heard. Otherwise, decisions will be made for them instead of they making their own decisions. That the youth need to be brave and be heard in big spaces. And I think that's a very important key to take away from this conversation as youth, that we can't be in the shadows. We can't have decisions being made for us. We must be part of the decisions. We must be part of the choices, because it is our future. It is us who are left in this planet. It is us who are left in this country. So we have about 20 minutes for question and answers. So we're going to open up the floor to take questions from our participants. So please put your hand up if you'd like to be given a chance to address your questions. The floor is open. Katuchelo, yes, you may speak.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Katuchelo Bashao. I'm currently a master's candidate at the University of Pretoria in Political Sciences. And I just want to find out a question. Sorry, I can't say her name. Excuse me, ma'am, for not knowing how to pronounce your name. But I just want to ask, I heard you saying, talking about policy intervention. Don't you think that there's a lot of policies surrounding climate change in South Africa, but they're not being implemented? Because I'm looking into this for my research. I'm looking into climate governance in South Africa, and I'm looking into the policies that currently exist and why they're not being implemented. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Thank you, Katuchelo. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. I think your assessment is very correct. South Africa probably has the most advanced policy. And again, you have to place that within context of, sub-Saharan Africa, and the fact that we've got a national adaptation strategy, a national climate strategy, and now, the just energy transition plans are being developed, and financial models to see how that is going to be delivered, are being developed. However, I think implementation has always been an issue. And I don't think it's only a South African issue. It's more evident and obvious for us because, yes, there are these policies and they've been in place for a long time. And I can't really point out with conviction where the challenges are. But I think just from the work that I've done is that it's very easy to put words together. We've got these amazing institutions, whether you're coming from UP, UNISA, UCT, you've got researchers who are putting in a lot of work in trying to find solutions that are workable. But often you find that it's being met with the political lens, it's met with the social lens, and also the economic lens. For policy to have feet, we need to have implementation plans, and these implementation plans need to be contextual. They need to be very specific to the needs of the people firstly, and often they meet the need of a few, and I say that very loosely. And at the same time, like, funding is a big issue in South Africa. And I mean, I won't even use the climate action or climate policy. I'll just use renewable energy and its implementation. We understand that municipalities account for a big portion of what Eskom generates. So Eskom generates, it's transmitted to municipalities, and municipalities basically hold the power basically to distribute or redistribute that electricity. And we all know that our municipalities are in shambles. That's not an energy problem, that's an institutional problem. And with that use of institution, I mean organizational and not necessarily the rules. So there's an organizational issue, and then you find that the institutional problems, which are municipal financial management plans. I mean, you see our Auditor General highlighting just the poor state of our municipalities. And if that is not addressed, you can't then lump a policy document onto a municipality that is not functional in a sense, or has not been able to do the basics of what a municipality is supposed to do. And I think some of those issues will probably get worse with decentralization and more people coming onto already broken, inundated, capacitated grids. Yeah, I hope that answers parts of your question. And if not, let me know.
All right, thank you for your question, Katsu. Over to you, Makosazana. Please present your question.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Makosazana Masugu. I'm from Eswatini, and I'm currently doing my master's in climate change policy in Algeria. So it's still on the climate change policy, or just policies, in fact, on that factor. So I'm wondering if, when policymakers implement, or when they develop these policies, do they take into consideration indigenous knowledge? Because or do we just focus on modernized ways of adaptation and mitigation? Because when you go to the rural areas, for example, there are still people there. They still adapt to these changes that climate change brings upon them. In as much as some may not know that this is climate change, but they'll tell you that, okay, rain doesn't fall on this certain month that we know. It has changed from this month to that month, and we have adapted by using this strategy. So I'm just curious to know that, do policymakers take into factor into account the indigenous knowledge, from indigenous people and marginalized groups, or do we just focus on the modernized methods of adaptation and mitigation, like saying transition to green energy and stuff like that? Thank you.
That's another big question, which I don't think I can answer fully myself. So I think there's some questions that perhaps the other panelists can also respond to. But I think, Makosazana, specifically to speak to the point of indigenous knowledge. I mean, at the start of my career, we were working at developing these local government climate mitigation and adaptation plans. And the mandate there, or the way at which the policy was going to be developed, was quite defined. The Department of Environmental Affairs was quite set on, we need this much, these many engagement meetings, and this is who you need to consult with. Which is all good and well, because you need to sort of frame your problem and get the people. So you have farmers in the room, you've got like these traditional leaders that are in the room, invitations are sent out, whoever pitches is there, and those are the contributions that are then taken and considered when you're developing these policies, which in my mind has never been enough. Because again, you are relying on, again, the organizations that are delivering that. You know, we had to go through Salga, for example, who's the one that is sending through the invitations. Some people miss their emails. There was very little work to try and get people into the communities to say, on this specific day or on these specific dates, we're thinking of having a consultation, who is available, but these are people that we want in the room. And because of that, the voice of the youth was not there. The voice of the farmers, I'm talking about rural farmers and rural development, that space was completely like ignored. And this is not only a South African issue. We're seeing it now in Germany with like the development of their just energy transition plans, where farmers from like rural areas within the European countries, which are far advanced with many of these policies, are protesting and saying, here are the solutions. You're saying you've walked 50,000 steps out of like the 100, but we haven't been consulted, and now we are seeing the impacts, and we are the ones that are disproportionately impacted. So I think that is definitely a gap that we can in ways fill. I mean, I'm from the rural areas. My mom is a farmer. She's a small scale farmer. So what you speak about, the understanding of some of these issues, they come alive when you're speaking to people like that. But I just, in some instances, I think, one, the resources to get to those people, and then not doing deep enough, or sorry, not doing work that is deep enough. So what I mean by that is that consulting deeply and consulting wide. I think a lot of our policy processes are just, this is probably not a good way to say it. Often we are ticking boxes. We're saying, this is what the contract said. We get consultants to come in, they do what they need to do, they deliver. We had 10 meetings, this is who came. And often it ends there, you know. And yes, there are usually these community meetings. And I mean, I'm speaking like that, but I think some of the processes have gotten better with time, but you just never do enough when it comes to consultation. And specifically of the people who don't always understand the languages at which these policy documents are presented. So we can't say just energy transition means something to us because we're sitting in the room. Climate action means what it means to us because we've been exposed and we've been working in these sectors. Some of us, I mean, are even privileged enough to be studying them at like these high level institutions. What about the people who don't understand that specific terminology, where we haven't even defined those things in a way that people understand, or we haven't asked them for the terms that make sense to them? There's really still a lot of work to do, and I'm hoping that all of you guys who are in these higher institutions of education, that you come up with these research projects, because research has such a strong role to play in closing a lot of that gap, because I think it's mostly the researchers who are then able to go that extra mile, and it's not limited to that.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question, Makosazana. Then over to you, Mpho.
Hello, my name is Mpho. I am an esteemed youth representative from Youth at SAYA. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation that really just, highlights our involvement as youth, and as well as, the kinds of leaps we need to make as activists. I more have so like comments to what has been said than questions. I was just thinking to myself, especially when you're talking about how with regards to the policies that are in place, there's special interests and interests that don't necessarily represent, people who are on the ground and who are genuinely struggling, and that took me back to looking at some of the health impacts that have been documented in Mpumalanga, where there's about in a study compiled in 2019, you find that there's estimated 2,000 deaths a year and cases of about 9,500 cases of chronic bronchitis in children aged 6 to 12, as well as 2,700 cases in adults. And that just shows us that, like, in talking about our transition to coal and kind of seeing the state also drag its feet in some instances, these are the people, that are left behind. I also just really wanted to also talk about something that, we've kind of like brought up with regards to our climate change bill. If you look at our climate change bill, there is actually no mention whatsoever of waste reclaimers. And I feel like those are also the people on the ground who are doing so much and putting in so much effort with the recyclables. You know, I always say to myself how tragic it is that they usually have to, you know, have to dig through the trash. You know, I did a sociological study on waste reclaimers actually experiencing food inequalities. And a lot of the stories that they'll tell you, they're actually so heartbreaking, from looking for food in, you know, waste bins to also having to cultivate relationships with people living in suburbs, kind of like an advanced form of like urban capitalism, if I can say that, but also just, you know, a lack of recognition from the state as well. You know, when you look at how much they do in terms of reducing pick it up collections by thousands of tons, yet they are not formally recognized in something that should be transformative, something that should be localized. So I just wanted to just add to the discussion in that matter. Thank you so much, Bukelwa. Thank you.
Can I quickly just make a comment? Won't be long. Mpho, I think you basically highlight something that I said in my last response, that it's often the researchers that go that extra mile. You have knowledge and capacity that other people won't have, even the people who are putting together these policy documents. And I say that boldly and, you know, with no fear of being quoted in that, because you have an understanding where I'm assuming that it has been through case studies, where you've spoken to these people, you've held interviews, and you've actually sat and you've looked at people in the eye. Yes, of course, research has to be done, but there's an understanding that you carry and a contribution that you can make into the policy processes that is far richer than any of us in this room can when it comes to that specific topic. And policies have to be published to the public for comment. And we have a responsibility as well. It's not only through the organizations that we are part of that we can do that. You can make a policy contribution or submit comments as, you know, a representative of that community, you know, whether it be through consultation or just because you've got the knowledge that is required, you know, to contribute in a way that will shift the policy in a way where inclusion is then a key consideration. So, I mean, take that also as your challenge and encouragement to not sideline yourself in looking out for policy processes that specifically speak to the areas or of interest, but specifically where you conduct research and are well-versed in those areas. I think there's such an incredible value in that.
All right, thank you for that. In the interest of time, I can only take two more questions. Mihlali here, and then there's also a question in the chat box. This is from Yakani. I'm sorry, Alaki, because of time, I will not be able to get to you. So Mihlali, and then I'll go to the chats. Over to you, Mihlali.
Sure. Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'm Mihlali. I'm in my capacity as curator of the Tshwane Hub, but also attending in my professional capacity as a social impact specialist. So thank you, Sis Bukelwa, for your presentation. It was very informative. Two questions from my side. The first being, how do we ensure that even in the centering of, you know, ideating as a core mechanism for including youth voices, that process is in and of itself inclusive? And by that, I mean, how do we ensure that we do not lose, you know, the voices of youth who are vulnerable in other socioeconomic areas and have historically been, you know, recipients of development actions rather than active participants or enablers and are engaged as such? And then the second one is, how do we direct funding towards capacitating the civil society sector, who's often viewed as, you know, a critical community asset for social change or driving social change? How do we ensure that we capacitate them to be drivers of education, of engagement and participation from the youth in the just energy transition, such that, you know, even at a grassroots level, it is accessible and understandable to all and not just some? Yeah, so those are my two questions.
I think all of you have been asking brilliant questions, and I mean, some of them are questions that I'm grappling with myself. I'll speak to the first one around centering perhaps the voices that are always on the sidelines, or the ones that are not given the platforms. We're talking about the youth that can't be here tonight for obvious reasons. Somebody doesn't have data. We're talking about language barriers. And I think that exposes some of, I mean, I touched on this briefly, the fact that we have these systems that are in place, old systems of working that are no longer fit for purpose, especially when we're looking at deep and real transformation. Yes, we are in South Africa in our national language, or the main language of working is English, but we cannot take for granted that our education system still fails in so many different ways as a legacy of our history and the legacy of apartheid. Like, we can't speak of that and feel uncomfortable because it is fact. You know, many of us are sitting here, we've got cousins who don't have job prospects simply because they didn't go to the schools that some of us went to, didn't come from the families of a social class where they're able to converse even comfortably. You know, some of them wrote their matric exams in English, but were taught in their native languages or in their home languages. Apologies for that. And what that really exposes is there's still a lot of work to be done in translation, in bringing everyone into the room. And bring everyone into the room is not just people attending, but us going into those communities. Because again, I think, like I said to, I think it was Mpho, is we are best suited to go into those spaces as the youth who recognize some of the privileges that we carry. Whilst we are fighting for our own voice to be heard and we're fighting to carve a space for ourselves, we need to also go into those spaces and make sure that the gaps we recognize. I think something I mentioned in the presentation is to find the real gaps and find a way and real practical entry points. And then the second one, which is around funding, I do apologize because I don't have a response for that, purely because funding it's just allocated the way that it's been. It's part of the problem or the reasons why we're finding ourselves in the conversations around the level of, is there justice in how these loans are coming into our country when it comes to climate action and the just energy transition itself? Who is giving the funding? You know, who has historically held funds in our country? Who has historically been of a higher class? And that's a question, I mean, that is broader than the discussion that we're having today, but I would encourage for us to actually look for those answers also, because I also don't have them, and I apologize for that. And maybe the other panelists might have them. But also there are grants that we can apply for as the youth. I feel like if you are below the age of 35, I mean, I call myself the older youth because I'm nearing the end of that range, but there are constantly grants that are out, and sometimes just keeping an eye for a grant for a project, for a local community project, even if it has nothing to do with the work that you're doing, but like within the spaces that we operate in, within the networks that we have as the youth collectively, we can keep an eye out for things that could benefit others for our greater good. I think for now, that's all I can say on that.
Thank you.
Right. So this is the very last question, then we're moving on to the next speaker. So this is from Yakani. He wrote on the chat, considering our coalition government has different stances on renewable energy framework and the scale and timeline on how renewable energy should be incorporated, what do you think we can do in our capacity as the youth to drive projects forward, since non-compliance is a running trend in the majority parties in our GNU?
Sorry, who asked that?
It's Yakani.
Yakani, you speak of something that I'm very passionate about. Like, my work is on renewable energy and the political economy, really. And my case studies were the city of Cape Town. I looked at Johannesburg. I looked at eThekwini, Tshwane, PE. And one of the key factors that has led to successful implementation is the policy drive or political ownership at a local level. I mean, let's not even go into the national level. And I will challenge you and say, start with the processes that are closest linked to the people. Municipalities, whether it be, you know, the district or local municipalities, have some form of formal process of plugging into how they look at renewable energy policy. You can even download some of these on their websites to really understand what your municipality thinks about renewable energy, even before you go to the national level, because I think at this point, a lot of the work that's happening nationally is focused on Eskom, and a lot of us struggle to reach Eskom because Eskom is a company. But if you're wanting to as an entry point, use the organizations that you are in to you know, source the information that you might not have, because again, who knows who matters in those spaces. But where you can't, you can access most of these policies of the municipalities' websites. And sometimes the challenge is you will have a document, but not necessarily know who to go to or who to reach out to. And unfortunately, again, that goes back to the institutions that exist. But I think just to touch on the question you ask about coalition governments, I think I have a hope, you know, with the coalition governments, and I'm speaking specifically when it comes to advancement of renewable energy, because of what the data of my research has shown and within my lab, that there are some political parties that have been very forthcoming and have been very bold, mayors that have gone out and actually held some webinars to speak and invite people to, like, you know, invest in renewable energy. But again, those processes, there's always room for more inclusion. There's always room for the youth voice. And one of the things that I found specifically is that the youth wasn't engaged in a way that was that the youth themselves felt like, okay, our voices were actually heard. And I think there is an opportunity there. There are definitely avenues. I think I'll end with that.
All right, thank you so much. I think we can give a round of applause to Vuyelwa Mzimande for her wonderful presentation and her in-depth insight when it comes to just energy transition, or just energy. I had a question myself, but I don't think we'll get there. So there's just thank you so much. I learned so much from your presentation. My background is science, so I'm a bit clueless when it comes to law and you know, all these things that are able in policies. I know a little, but I don't know enough to have such an in-depth conversation. So thank you so much for your presentation and for your research and your knowledge and your in-depth knowledge in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we're moving on to our next speaker. As I mentioned at the beginning, that one of the key themes for LCOY 2024 is climate finance. So in order to speak about Climate Finance 101 is Ms. Anda Dungula from Fair Finance Solution South Africa. She will be giving us an introduction on climate finance, its importance, and how youth can engage with it. So a short bio on Ms. Anda. Ms. Anda Dungula is a candidate legal practitioner under the Business and Human Rights Program at the Center of Applied Legal Studies, located at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Politics and International Relations, obtaining in 2017, and LLB, obtaining 2022 degrees from Wits University. She previously worked as a legal intern at Center of Applied Legal Studies and the Gender Justice Program, under the Gender Justice Program. So Ms. Vuyelwa, over to you, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Kamokhelo, for that introduction. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening for such an important topic to discuss, and especially engaging with the youth on Youth Month. Thank you so much for organizing this. Yeah, so my name is Anda Dungulu. As Kamu already mentioned, I'm a candidate legal practitioner. I'm from the Center for Applied Legal Studies, which is a public interest law clinic located at Wits University's School of Law. So I am here in my capacity as a candidate under our business and human rights program, which works towards holding corporations accountable for human rights abuses, as well as issues as a result of environmental harm from their activities. So we also are part of Fair Finance South Africa, where we also just work towards mitigating, finding ways to mitigate and also just address environmental issues and human rights issues that arise as a result of corporate activities, as well as this new thing called climate finance. And just how, what it is, what it's for, and just how, we also predict things will translate from it, as well as just ways in which we can be involved in ensuring that, these activities are not done without the participation of the public, essentially. So this evening, I have been tasked with discussing climate finance in South Africa, as well as the just energy transition, which the previous speaker spoke about a little bit previously. And so to begin my discussion, my presentation this evening, I will start with just speaking a little bit about climate change, why there's this movement in climate finance, what it's for, how this whole thing is meant to work, essentially. And so to begin then, I'll start with climate change. So climate change, refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, right? And this has resulted in extreme weather patterns, which we refer to as global warming. So some amount of climate change, right, or rather global warming, can be attributed to natural phenomena such as volcanic eruptions, but essentially the scientific community is in agreement that this is largely due to emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which occur as a result of burning of fossil fuels. So that would be your coal, your oil, your gas. And the main such gas is carbon dioxide that is produced by these emissions. And it's largely produced by the energy sector, but it's not limited to just that. So the generation of electricity has been quite a huge contributor to emissions in our atmosphere. But we've also had oil, contribute as well through our means of transportation. So your cars, your trucks, your ships, your planes are also some of the major contributors to greenhouse emissions, as well as factories and manufacturing facilities. So when we speak of, factories, manufacturing facilities, even those that produce these ways of transportation and electricity, the people, or rather the entities that conduct them, are transnational and multinational corporations, as they are usually the ones who are conducting this, development projects, such as, generating electricity. And so climate change has resulted in fundamental shifts to the environment already, causing, loss of life in many places, economic instability. If we can think about Haiti, for example, how they had that earthquake back in, I think, 2007, if I remember correctly, but I might be getting it wrong. But as a result of that, they have never really been able to recover economically. And they also lost a lot of people in the process who passed away as a result of that situation. And I mean, even in the aftermath, you have, poverty rates skyrocketing as a result. So that's just one example of just the effects of climate change, really. And we also have your increase to poor health outcomes. We have, you know, like heat waves. And I've seen in India this year, they've been going through quite an intense heat wave, which has resulted also in loss of life. We've had floods in South Africa, we've had droughts. And yeah, we just stand a greater risk of famine and food insecurity as a result of climate change. And so it is, you know, a very serious issue that needs to be addressed and mitigated very quickly. And so how do we then do that, right? So we are now moving towards what is called a just energy transition, right? Which basically describes like the gradual movement towards green energy sources or minerals, and will also supposedly ensure that there's no negative impact on society, on people's livelihoods, etc. But then how do we get into this just transition, right? So it will require us to enact a systematic change and take decisive action towards addressing climate issues. And one of the most important questions on the global agenda currently has been how to help developing economies, which would be us, you know, former colonized countries, to like develop our economies in a way where we also decarbonize our energy systems, right? And transition into resilient, affordable, and clean energy infrastructure. And the model that is gaining momentum in this instance for funding agreements is known as the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, which we call JETPs in short. So JETPs are an innovative approach, right, of international cooperation, which is meant to accelerate country-led energy transition. And this model, funny enough, is supported by the European Union, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, France, and other European countries, as well as Japan. So collectively, they aim to help emerging economies secure a just transition towards low carbon energy sources. And this approach was adopted in 2021. So it's really, I at least find it funny that it's former colonial countries that are so interested in assisting, you know, emerging economies into, you know, this transition, and just, you know, committing so much money towards this movement, considering their history on the continent, and how, you know, even historically, we know that they've just come to extract our resources using transnational corporations and taking them back to their own countries, using them for their own development, and with what's left, you know, processing it and then selling it back to us. So I really just think it's a bit funny that they would be the ones, you know, at the forefront of this. Yeah, but anyway, in 2020, ESCOM, our ESCOM already, you know, had an office established in 2020 in achieving, you know, net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And they've promised an increase in sustainable jobs. And that's, you know, this movement will have a positive impact on air quality, on water usage, and just greater preservation of biodiversity in South Africa. But then what will then be needed to move towards this just transition? So what will be needed and what will be used to move towards this green energy transition will be critical, what is referred to as critical minerals, right? So green energy itself is an energy type that is generated from natural gases. So it comes from your renewable energy technologies, and it's facilitated by minerals such as copper, your lithium, your chrome, your manganese, etc. And it's meant to, you know, ensure that such as your wind, your water, etc. And so each of these technologies works in different ways, which would be taking power from the sun, from your solar panels, from your wind turbines, and essentially just not producing what's this green energy gases that affect the atmosphere. So for the just transition, these minerals are very important, but unfortunately, they will still have to be mined in order for us to be able to use them. So that means we are nowhere near, stopping mining activities in South Africa, unfortunately. And so what's nice about this green energy, at least, is that it supposedly won't produce pollution, unlike fossil fuels, and will just basically take us through a transition of just using energy that can be used, in our homes, and can also be used like at a larger sort of industrial scale, but using energy that is clean and won't affect our atmosphere. So in moving towards this just transition, right? There's an international treaty referred to as the Paris Agreement, which is part of the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was adopted in 2015. And it was signed by about 125 countries, and it's meant to assist with climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And essentially, the treaty recognizes that financial flows should be consistent with like a pathway towards slow greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. So essentially, it basically sort of recognized that financial flows should also be consistent in assisting the movement from fossil fuels to green energy. So that's what we refer to as climate finance. So what is the point of climate finance? And what is this climate finance essentially? So climate finance refers to all financial flows that seek to address climate change as well as its consequences. And it is sourced from local, national to transnational financing institutions. And because South Africa is heavily reliant on coal for our electricity, and we want to move towards green energy, right? And leave behind this bad and dirty energy because it's polluting, right? So in order to get there, we will need a lot of money that will facilitate, this context, as well as, policy change and alignment that will ensure that there's adaptation infrastructure that will assist in mitigating, further effects of climate change. And we know that we've already began experiencing climate change ourselves, from the change in weather patterns to droughts to floods, etc. So who'll provide this finance? Who'll provide the funding towards this move, right? So we have what we call development finance institutions. So these are like specialized development banks and subsidiaries, which are set up to support private sector development in developing countries. So in South Africa, historically, DFIs were actually very integral to the apartheid states project in state-led industrialization. And it was especially the pressures of increasing international isolation and sanctions, which saw them being, heavily used in South Africa as a way for the apartheid government to tightly control our highly concentrated private sphere. And they were then like sort of a critical component in terms of assisting the state in developing a racially based industrial economy, which later assisted them in sort of prolonging their stay in power, even when they were being sanctioned. Yeah, but currently, DFIs in South Africa function as a government-supported finance providers that pursue economic and social development objectives, excuse me. And so given their substantial financing role towards development, they can either sort of assist us positively in addressing climate action or worsen the climate crisis. And we have in South Africa, the Industrial Development Corporation, which was founded in 1940. And we also have a few others as well that assist with financing our development projects in South Africa. But now you might ask yourself, what is the issue with them, really? What is the problem with the way they function, right? So since their inception, they have always operated without much oversight because obviously most corporations were here to extract our resources and leave. And so to ensure that that process was smooth, there was obviously no involvement of parliament or civil society or any legal instruments that facilitate their functioning and their activities. So there's never been any transparency or accountability of these institutions as well as their financing practices. But what's wrong with their financing practices? So the way they make funding decisions, because it's not transparent, they've gotten away with funding projects that have ended up committing human rights abuses and causing environmental harm. So think specifically around mining affected communities in South Africa who've been largely affected by these projects. So for instance, the production of coal for electricity, you will have a company, for example, go into a community, start mining coal and does not take adequate steps towards consulting the community. So seeking consent and also just involving them in the activities and ensuring that they're not negatively affected by the impact of these activities. And so obviously this has meant that the activities that are funded by DFIs undermine people's security to their land. Sometimes communities are moved and other important steps such as environmental assessments are not adhered to, are not shared with communities. And yet mining companies still get some of their funding from development finance institutions, who also get some of their funding from larger DFIs, such as the World Bank and the IMF. So think of the European Union and all those Western countries that I mentioned before as being involved heavily in these processes. So the activities that are funded by DFIs have then obviously resulted in social issues such as human rights abuses, gender inequality, GBV. They've also contributed to environmental issues such as pollution, biodiversity loss, etc. And in many mining affected communities, you'll find that the women there, for instance, are affected heavily when it comes to conceiving children, from giving birth to children who have birth defects, from children, being born with conditions that are directly linked to pollution and activity by these corporations. And so, because we know that mining companies in Africa have often caused and contributed to human rights abuses in pursuit of conflict, we've seen child labor or rather child slavery in the DRC, from mining cobalt to the killing of workers in South Africa in Marikana, and many other examples. So we know that governments have largely been unable to regulate these activities, which is why we have, the issues, the social and environmental issues that we have today. And predominantly, these activities are operated by transnational corporations, which are companies that come from the West, as I mentioned before, and they come here, extract resources, and then leave. So now, what is going to happen to DFIs and climate financing, having that background of coloniality in the way that mining and just issues around mining have occurred in South Africa, right? Firstly, we need to find out who is doing all this financing, who stands to benefit from this energy transition, and who stands to be affected, right? National governments and their development institutions receive funding, as I mentioned, from developed countries and agencies. And so you want to ask yourself, really, whose interests are they really trying to protect here? And who will be, who will stand to gain from this just transition? And you can think of mining affected communities and how they've been affected, overall. And so what we want to do now, so in this just transition, then what do we want? We want to understand that DFIs are key actors in the promotion of positive economic and development outcomes. And so we need to ensure that of this size, there's accountability measures, there's transparency measures, and we must ensure that the money that is being used for this transition is used exactly for this transition, and that accountability and transparency also involves local and civil society, the youth. We must also be able to participate freely in this decision making, and we must ensure that DFIs are also concerned with human rights issues, with issues with the environment, and that when they finance, these activities, those are things that they sort of also consider. So, because mining activities are still going to continue, we need to make sure that at least in the just transition, we're involved, and also we are part of decision making, so that we can hold corporations accountable for any, abuses of rights, as well as the degradation of the economy. So because, this has quite been long, I will stop there with my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anda. We're a bit pressed for time right now. So what I'll do is we're just going to move on to the next presenter, which is me. So I'm going to present. Then after my presentation, then we'll open up question and answer for both you and I. All right, so I'm going to share. Here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Kamogelo Sehole, and I'm a junior researcher at the Institute for Catalysis and Energy Solutions. It is a research unit within the University of South Africa. We are based in the Science Campus, which is here in Johannesburg, Florida, Rudolph. I know most people, whenever you talk about UNISA, they think of that huge Titanic building in Pretoria, but no, there's actually a smaller campus here in Florida that is dedicated strictly for science research, and that is where I'm based. I'm also a community engagement lead. I lead community engagement projects that are conducted by the Institute that are related to energy. My academic background, I have my undergrad and honors, and right now doing about to start my master's in energy. But my academic background is in chemistry. And just to say, my interests, they expand beyond research and academics, because I've been involved in a number of organizations, and I've come to learn that, if you want to implement enforce any big projects in the energy field, you need to have a good understanding of energy policies. And I've also been involved, and I've learned that, the UN and SDGs, they drive a lot of these policies. And so that's what I've gathered from youth organizations that I'm part of, that are focusing on energy. And most recently, I've taken interest in nuclear. So I'm also now a nuclear enthusiast. So this picture that you see of me on the left was taken last year, September. I was attending the International Atomic Energy Agency 67 General Conference at the UN headquarters in Vienna. So yes, so I'm very much into the nuclear energy. So the IEA, just to give a small background, the IEA is like the big brothers, the UN big brothers, when it comes to anything that is related to nuclear, to peaceful application of nuclear technology. So I don't know if you guys have noticed with the conflict happening between Russia and Ukraine, there's been a lot of talk about nuclear. The IEA has been the one that has been going there, having consultation between the two presidents to ensure that we do not have a nuclear catastrophe in the world. So, as I said, I'm a community engagement lead. So I'm very passionate about seeing science in action because I believe as scientists, we have a societal responsibility to ensure that whatever it is that we do does not just end up on some research paper, that we actually go out there and help our communities, that we go out there and do something about all this research work that we've done, all these great findings that we have. So as I mentioned, in our institute, we're very forward about implementing research outcomes in society. So at ICAS, there's a lot of the research focus is based on designing methods of reducing energy consumption. So it is through this focus that the Waste to Energy Community Engagement Initiative was born, and that's the initiative that I'm part of. So the community engagement that applies to research outcomes in communities as part of the university's social corporate responsibility. We mostly target disadvantaged communities that are susceptible to energy poverty, and we also collaborate with agricultural SMMEs that are looking for alternative forms of energy and also to lower their energy expense. So one project that I'm very, very proud of, that I've been part of from the beginning, that's taken up a lot of my time from family, my books and everything, is this one. It's the SACAN Sustainable Building Water Energy Nexus. So this project, SACAN is the name of a school, a preschool that is based in rural KZN, in a village called Obunjaneni. Obunjaneni is about an hour from Harrismith, and their town is Bergville. So it's very remote. Well, not very, very remote, but it's a village. So the school comprises of about 90 learners between 3 months and 6 years that attend the school, and 5 staff members. So we were actually approached by one of our networks that wanted to give back to the community, they wanted to do something about the state of the school. And because it was in dilapidated conditions and they lacked adequate building, the kids were squashed up in this one room that the structure looked like it was about to fall any minute now. And they had no proper ablution facilities, which is also a health concern for both the workers and the kids that are there. So they approached us as UNISA, ICAS, Waste to Energy Community Engagement, and they asked us to partner up in this project. Our partners, they came in with their contribution to this was the supplying the school with building classrooms and a kitchen and ablution facilities for the school using waste material. So if you look at the 2 pictures, that's actually a classroom that is made from waste scrap metals. So these scrap metals would have been discarded in some landfill, but instead it's been repurposed to make beautiful classrooms that learners can learn in and give them that sense of dignity in their learning journey. So the buildings are constructed from, as I said, waste material, and we came in as the Waste to Energy community engagement portfolio, and we provided alternative energy. Because the school uses biomass, firewood, dried cow dung, and other traditional forms of energy, they approached us to come on board and provide an alternative form of energy for the school, because they were crying a lot about, even though they had LPG, the cost of procuring LPG in a very low income community was a huge strain on the school. So we came in and we installed a biodigester for the school. So a biodigester is in layman terms, it's just a vessel that takes an organic waste material and converts it into biogas. Biogas is a combination of methane, which is a flammable gas, and carbon dioxide. So this biogas, since it's flammable, is connected straight into the kitchen onto a stove, and it works pretty much the same way as an LPG stove. So now, instead of the school buying LPG or going out and sourcing out firewood, they now generate their own energy from their own waste. So it does not only take cow dung, which is ample in the area because it's a rural area. It can also take food waste. And so organic cow dung, actually any animal dung, even human waste can be used in the biodigester, food waste. What we did also, since there's no sewage treatment plant in the area, the ablution facilities, they're connected to a pump that drines the waste from the toilets and pumps it into the biodigester. So the feed that is used to generate energy at the school is, as I said, cow dung, food waste, and human waste is used to power up cooking for cooking and heating the school. Upon completion of the biodigester, we came to realize that the community has a serious water challenge. It's one of those areas that does not have good infrastructure, water infrastructure. So in order to use a biodigester, you need water. It's half down in most instances and half water in order to make a slurry that goes inside the biodigester. So if there's no water, the school cannot produce gas. So we came up with we drew up a proposal and reached out to a company called Grundfos. It is a Danish company, and that sells mostly water pumps. And Grundfos donated about 20,000 euros to us. Well, they gave to us to give to them, and which we used that donation to drill a borehole, and we bought water pumps, borehole pumps, and solar panels to power up the borehole pumps. So now the school has consistent and uninterrupted water supply. So if you look there on the left, up there, that is the building of which the learners were all squashed up in, all 90 of them. And as you can see, it doesn't look very stable. It looks like it was built by John on the road and then came through and said, I can put a brick on top of another one, which was very unsafe for the learners. And if you look at the bottom, that is what the classroom looks like, or as I said, made from recycled waste material and recycled waste material. And there's also rainwater harvesting tanks around the school to ensure that there's always water. But as I said, the water there is not enough because the area experienced a long period where they do not have any water. And if you can see that little girl there, getting water from a tap of which we installed at the school that is from the borehole. And then below that picture, you can see some community members getting water on the road. So we also installed a tap outside the school to ensure that it's not just the school that gets water, but the community as a whole also gets water, because it's not just a school problem, it's a community problem. Then on the left, right, on the left, on the right, that is actually a picture of a biodigester, that little building that is housing the biodigester, and it's a PVC tube, and then you have the walls that encase it to ensure that there's no sharp material that go through, and then compromise the gas production. And if you can see below that, that is a picture of the piping from outside going into the kitchen and connecting to the biogas stove, of which you just light it on like a normal LPG stove, and you cook same way as you would an LPG stove. So since we've done a couple of projects, we're always looking at ways, we always have putting in effort in order to improve the system and to make it affordable and to reduce environmental footprint and broaden its reach in the community. So in that effort, we collaborated with Isuzu Motors to improve the design. From the previous structures, the previous pictures, the classrooms over here, this waste material, this waste metal scraps, they were donated by Isuzu Motors. Isuzu Motors, when they import parts for assembly, for car assembly on their site in Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, they tend to accumulate a lot of these scrap materials, and they really have no use of what to do with them. So we reached out to them. We came up with a proposal in order to improve our biodigested design, to make it more affordable and a bit more sustainable. So instead of using brick and mortar to construct the casing, the enclosure for the biodigester, we now used waste scrap materials that is graciously donated by Isuzu. So if you can see up there, that is during the process where we're assembling it. Everything here is waste material. Even the white stuff, the white foam, it's actually part of waste that is generated by Isuzu. Then if you can see here at the bottom, that is the biodigester bag, which, as I said, is a PVC bag that you add your organic waste matter in, and it's snugly fit in there, and to ensure that it is not pierced, because the most important thing when you generating biogas is you need to have the conditions inside the bag need to ensure that there's no air going in. It's what we call an anaerobic process, where meaning that the chemical process that does not involve any air. So you need a good casing, and it needs to be well sealed to ensure that no air comes in to affect the chemical reaction that happens. So future outlook, as I said, we're looking more at ways of reducing the costs and its environmental impact of the biodigested design. So from the ones that I've shown, you, the pictures of the ones that I've shown you, those are a 10 cubic meter biodigester, and they produce about 8 kilowatts of energy per day. This is enough energy to cook or to heat for up to 6 hours per day. Right now, we're currently working on new design to upscale the bags to 40 cubic meters. This will hopefully produce about 4 times more energy. This will allow users to connect to gas generators and use the power and use it to power an entire household, to power an entire household just using waste. But I must add that biogas is an alternative solution. It cannot entirely replace the current energy use that we have. I must also add that it's dependent, the production of gas is dependent of microbes, and microbes tend to be temperamental because, yeah, they've got personality, unfortunately. So in instances where it's very, very cold, the microbes tend to not be very active. You'd find that you'd have low gas production. So you might not produce enough energy to power up your whole house that day on cold days. But when it's warm, you might have enough energy to do all the tasks that you need in the house. So with the examples that I've shown you guys, they've mainly been for rural and informal settlement, because that's where we implemented these projects. When it comes to urban areas where there isn't enough space in your house, in the yard to construct a device of that size in your yard, or it's just not appealing, or where there's no livestock to get your dung from the animals, or you do not have access to mounds of food waste. So obviously it cannot be easily replicated in urban areas. A solution that's been done by the project that's been done, initiative that's done by private sector and the government, is the landfill gas to electricity project. As you can see from those two pictures, I took those pictures at Mary Louis landfill gas to electricity project. So what happens is at your landfills, what they do is they pile it up, and then they pile all the waste at landfills, and then they compact it with sand, so it look like this little mountain. When you pass by, it look just like a mountain. And over the years, what happens is there's what you call a reaction that happens that produces that biogas, because it's a combination of organic and inorganic waste. What happens is that methane that I spoke about, that methane and carbon dioxide in that enclosed space where there's no oxygen coming in, is produced. And what happened is they put in a drill that extracts that gas, and that gas is connected to a generator. That generator produces electricity, and that electricity is actually fed to the grid. So there's about 3 that I know of. There's 2 in Johannesburg, the Mary Louise and Robinson Deep landfills. They each produce about 1 megawatt of electricity per day. It's not a lot, but it's enough to, it's enough. 1 megawatt of energy is enough to power about 33 households, because a typical South African household uses about 30 megawatts of energy per day. Then there is the Bronkhorstspruit biogas plant that produces 3.5 megawatts of energy. And City of Cape Town actually has in the plans to produce to convert one of the landfills into a gas to electricity project, and this is called the Fisher Shock landfill, and it's proposed to produce about 2 megawatts of energy. So that's in the works by City of Cape Town. So as I said, biogas is an alternative energy to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. It cannot completely replace the current systems that we have, but it can reduce our reliance on it. Right now, if you look at the graph on the right now, the electricity grid produces about 41% of all the 41%, and it's the largest CO emitting sector. So we need to look at ways of reducing our reliance on coal-generated electricity. As you know, in South Africa, about 80% of South Africa's electricity is generated from coal. And as I said, it's one of the biggest CO2 emitters. We can't replace all the plants overnight, and it will take a couple of years before we can, in order for the transition to be just. We can't just shut down all coal power plants, because a lot of people will lose jobs, and we will be in the dark, we'll be without electricity. So it can't be an overnight thing, but we can, as I said, reduce how much energy we use, from how much electrical energy we use. So we can reduce that by reliance on coal by diversifying our energy sources. So biogas is a clean, carbon neutral form of energy that can assist low-income communities. Taking into account, according to the IAEA, there's about 600 million people in the sub-Saharan Africa who do not have access to electricity. And mostly these people, they rely on unsafe forms of energy to meet their daily needs for cooking and heating, because those are the 2 most important needs when it comes to energy and lighting. So a system like this low-cost system is one that can be applied in such regions where it's low income regions. in order to meet their energy needs. And that's it from me. Thank you. All right, and that's it for me. So now I'm going to open up the questions for myself and Anda. We do not have much time, so I think maybe two me, two Anda, and then we're going to close the session. Please put your hand up if you have a question. Oh, okay, I can see that. All right, Mihlali, over to you.
Just a quick one for you, Amo. For any of the projects that you have done, is there room for further investment, either to make it more sustainable, so continue, working within those communities, or replicating at scale?
Well, the thing is, with every project, you're learning something new. We've been doing this since before I even joined the institute. I think the first one was installed in 2017. And with each biodigester that's installed, the system is improved. In terms of scaling up, I assume you mean more projects, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. In terms of scaling up, there's actually a plan for that. So last year, UNISA turned 150 years. So the VC in celebration of the 150 years has vowed to commit money for us to install 150 biodigesters in disadvantaged communities, because energy is actually one of UNISA's niche, one of the big societal challenges that the university wants to be at the forefront of addressing. So yes, there's right now we're working on working on installing 150 digesters.
Okay. Could you make the resource you were presenting available for everyone who attended?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it'll be shared with everyone after this. Is there another question? Tiamo, was your hand up?
Yes, it is. So, hi everybody, I'm Tamer from Morocco, and I'm here with my team from EarthFlow, from the African Leadership Academy. So my question is to both of you, so anybody of you can take it. My question is, after seeing both of your presentations, is this type of alternative projects could be sufficient to cover the need of energy that Africans use and can lead us to overcome our use of fossil energy? Like, could this be an enough alternative?
Are you talking about biogas?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So as I say, yes and no. You can't meet baseload. Sadly, you can't meet baseload with biogas. It doesn't matter how big we scale it up. I don't think we could get to a point where you can meet baseload with biogas. So, but it can reduce our reliance. So if what you need in order to meet our energy needs in Africa is diversification of energy source, right? I know right now we're talking about clean energy. In order to do that, in order to address the energy challenges in Africa, you need to have massive infrastructures to address, to fill in the gaps, because it's empty. Unlike other countries where they are transitioning, the developed countries, they're just transitioning. We are not transitioning. The sub-Saharan countries are not transitioning. They are starting. So in order to meet the energy need, you need a lot of energy. You need big infrastructures, and you need a lot of watts to cover everyone. So that can be achieved, yes, by solar, by hydro, by wind. I know we're moving away from coal, so I won't say coal, but in South Africa, it's very special because we already have the coal infrastructure. We can't just switch it off. So I would say we would need to invest more in clean clean coal technologies such as membranes that are used to capture the COs that are, instead of being released into the air, membranes can be used to capture the CO instead of being released into the air. And of course, nuclear energy. So you need these forms of energy that are massive and they can power up your entire country. But biogas on its own, no, it's just to reduce the reliance. Lerato?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Kamo. I hope Anda is still here. I have a question for her. So climate finance has always been a bit of a foggy topic for me, so I'm glad she definitely presented on that. So I want to know, as a youth organization or as just like a local community organization, how then do we hold these, I guess, entities accountable in terms of why did you not do a thorough background check in terms of funding a certain project that could potentially be disastrous to the environment and to communities? How does a local community have like some kind of power to address something like that and confront these organizations?
Thank you so much for that question. So I mean, the reason why we have your fair finance organizations is because we're trying to find ways to do exactly that, right? To find ways of, because the problem is that with these institutions, it's not from a lack of awareness of the activities of the people that they fund. They know, but because historically there hasn't been any mechanisms to hold them accountable for funding them, that's where now we are at, trying to find ways to make them account, firstly, and secondly, to also contribute, in fact, to ensure that they mitigate these issues being a thing, you know, in the just transition. So they have been able to be protected by the fact that communities and community members and the youth and so forth have not been given, or rather have not had spaces that enable them to hold them accountable. And so that's why they've been able to continue in the way that they are. But obviously, moving forward, now it is our job, obviously, as civil society, as the youth, and everyone who has an interest in this, because it's a public interest issue that addresses an issue that affects the entire public. There should be mechanisms that you're speaking of holding them accountable, and there should be mechanisms of mitigating these things in the future. And that kind of space has really, you know, been sort of closed up for a reason, because they know that it would absolutely affect the profits of those who are conducting these activities, because their main point is to make activities. So they sort of masquerade as these, you know, progressive institutions, but essentially they are nothing more than just, you know, institutions that seek to, you know, get profits, and they are able to get profits by, you know, maintaining the status quo. So our job is then to find those mechanisms that you're mentioning to ensure that we do hold them accountable.
All right, I'm going to take more questions, then we're going to close the session. So Beatrice, then Esihle. So Beatrice, you can go first.
Hello, Beatrice Marcus from UNISA under ICAS. So my question is to, I think Africa, we are behind when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution technology. So I'm asking like both to Kamo and the other presenter, where are we in terms of 4IR when we're generating renewable energy, clean energy, and also in terms of legal actions, where are we standing as Africa? That's my question.
Do you want to answer that? Because it's both of us.
I think you can take it on, please.
Okay. Well, you answer the second part with the legal. In terms of 4IR, you know what? It's very hard to develop anything technologically if you do not have electricity, if you do not have some form of energy. So sadly, the more behind we are when it comes to getting electricity on the grid, the more behind we are when it comes to implementing innovation. It'll put us in a position where we are always the consumers of the global north instead of being producers. And that is the disadvantage that we have in Africa. We can try and do this and do that, but if you want to compete with the US or China, Japan, we can never compete at the same level. I mean, how are we going to, if we come up with 4IR innovations, technology, you need, if you're gonna have like a warehouse where you build these things, whatever it may be, if you don't have electricity, how are you gonna power that warehouse? There's only so much that solar can produce. There's only so much that generators can power. So yeah, if we want to move with the rest of the world in terms of 4IR, we first need to get the basics done, which is to get electricities on the grid into our house, into our businesses. So yeah. I don't know, did I answer your question, Beatrice?
You did. It's okay. Thank you.
The last part, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
just
Anda
to
can
add
answer
on.
that.
Yeah, just to add on the legal aspects of the 4IR. So the law is just a bit behind on these issues, particularly with just, you know, the regulation and just enforcement of laws in this regard. So I'm not really well versed on 4IR technologies, but as Gamu has said before, in order to compete with Western states, we're going to have to be able to regulate corporate activities within South Africa to ensure that you know, we are able to produce these technologies that will facilitate 4IR. But we can't really do that up unless we have laws and regulations in place that ensure that you know, those who are meant to be conducting this development are able to do so in such a way that it benefits our communities firstly, and it does not take away from the rights that we currently have. And we can only be competitive when we are at an equal level with first world countries. And currently we are not there. And from a legal point of view, those are laws and regulations that even the ones that we currently have are not really enforceable. And so it's still going to have to be a work in progress to develop those laws and regulations as well.
Right. Esihle, I'll end with you. So I'll give Saseko, please be very brief, and then Esihle, then we're done. Saseko, you can ask your questions.
Okay, hi, I'm Nsaska Malabala, studying engineering at TSC. I just wanted to ask, when did you start with the Siakile Foundation, and how did you learn about it and hear about it? And how long did it actually take for that project to, was that like, not end, but you know, the phase of it? How long was that?
So we started in the week before level 5 lockdown was announced. So we were actually there in KZN when lockdown was announced in 2020, March of 2020. So we just arrived and we had done this site analysis and assessment. And so when that got enforced, we had to stop everything. And then we went back in October 2020 to start the work, and in end of 2020, December 2020, we had installed a biodigester. We successfully installed the biodigester, just the biodigester, not the classrooms. And we had we learned a very hard lesson because the entire structure fell apart. The area, we used the same principle that we used in Johannesburg to build the biodigester. We did not take into account that the area has a very low water level. So when you dig to install your biodigester, the area around it got flooded because of groundwater. And so we had to started again in 2020, and we finished it in 2022. But as I said, I must mention that we weren't on site the whole time. We'd go there for like 3 days, 4 days, and come back, go there 3 days, 4 days, come back. Yeah, but if it was done at one go, it takes about 2 weeks. If we do it every day, it will take about 2 weeks to install a biodigester, to build a biodigester made out of bricks. Hence, we're trying to move away to using scrap materials, and because that will reduce the amount of materials that is needed: cement, bricks, water, sand, all that, and we just use scrap metals, which is free, and nuts and bolts, which are not that expensive. This new system that we've designed will take about 3 days to install a 10 cubic meter biodigester. And how we came about through this is actually through a network. They knew what we were doing, and they thought that since they're about sustainable building the classroom and having rainwater harvesting system, that in order to continue with the theme of sustainability, they should add energy to it. So they invited us, and we did not implement it from the beginning. It was not our idea to enforce. Yes, I hope I've answered your question.
Also, when did you hear about it, and how did you hear about it?
How did I hear about it?
Foundation, Siakile, for you to be a part of it.
Oh no, Sakile. As I said, we were approached by one of our networks. So the guys that built the classroom from the waste material. They approached
the
us.
students of UNISA.
No, the institute.
Oh, okay.
Yes, the department of which I work in. They approached the institute. Yes, not
Thank you.
student on their own. Yeah. Okay, last question, and then we're done.
Okay, thank you for the presentations. I think my questions are both for Anda and Kapelo. I just wanted, because this is something that I'm also very interested in, I wanted to understand, like, in recognizing that the just energy transition, it won't solely be about about energy, but also the economy, about like how to transform the economy and to address the socioeconomic needs of those whose jobs will be affected by the transition, especially young people. How can we ensure that how can South Africa like effectively integrate skills development programs into this transition? And also, what role does climate finance play in ensuring that this is effective?
And this is your question. I'm sitting this one out.
Yeah. So part of like the package presented on this just transition is that it will also generate employment. It's supposed to assist with generating employment, like increasing opportunities for employment as well, and just getting into like, you know, jobs for young people that will include innovation in terms of, you know, the use of these energy systems. And yeah, so the it's part of that package, right? That the benefits of this just transition are meant to like also reach the youth in terms of creating employment, and that obviously that kind of training we would assume will come from, you know, the financing of the entire thing. So whoever they get to finance, who will be taking forward you know, this just transition through mining. So an example, for instance, would be if, say, there's a community in Limpopo that's mining, say, chrome or another just transition mineral, it will follow the very same laws and principles that are meant to be effected in mining communities. So things like ensuring that there's youth participation around the mining. There's also support for projects by community members, including the youth, by the people who will be conducting that kind of mining. So yeah, there's room there to create employment, and yeah, it's been said to be part and parcel of this entire transition. But over and above that, community members in general, so you can think about, say, your mine workers, for example, if we were to move from just mining dirty minerals and into, you know, something else that doesn't involve mining, then what would happen to, you know, their employment rates? What would happen to their jobs? So moving justly means that, you know, things like that are not impacted negatively. People are still able to work, but are working now towards transitioning from the bad to the green, which is supposedly better. So yeah, I hope I've answered your question, but yeah, employment of the youth and just communities in general, and just other opportunities that will come from, you know, this this transition are definitely also geared towards employment. Yeah.
Okay,
Because communities, sorry,
okay.
because
It's okay.
because communities like working with things that are tangible. So I want to know, besides what is on paper, what strategies do you have to ensure that all of these things are economically and socially inclusive, and also they ensure that they also get to have decent jobs in whatever jobs that they are supposed to be transitioning to, that will also provide them decent pays?
So so for instance, with the Finance Coalition, we try to engage with you know, the finance institutions themselves to find that kind of information. But for the most part, you know, this is information that is hidden. This is information that's usually not open to public discussions. And so part of the work that we do then is to sort of push towards having access to that kind of information. So we can also know, like, how this transition is going to be effective. And unfortunately, finance institutions have really operated in such a way that they've sort of contributed in maintaining the status quo of communities that are affected by mining. So then the important thing then is to just sort of try to understand how they function, to force them to be more transparent about their activities, so that way we are able to have some kind of influence in terms of who they fund. And if they fund someone who commits abuses to people or the environment, then we're able to make them account for that by perhaps stopping that funding for that activity, or just having even sort of mechanisms to hold those companies, you know, criminally liable for the activities that might be, you know, detrimental to communities. It's a work in progress, and it's a work that, you know, not just for Finance South Africa, but all organizations across the world who are, you know, faced with these issues are trying to find sort of ways around it, find ways to be involved even, you know, in the decision making of this yeah, fundings. But it's absolutely just work we have to do now, like through campaigns, through research, through sending letters to these institutions. But essentially, they've been inaccessible to the public. And so it's been very hard to engage with them and sort of even have strategies around the question you're asking. So it's work in progress. We are learning as we go, we're strategizing as we go, and we're adapting as we go, as to how we can sort of be also like involved in this just transition.
All right, thank you.
And
I just realized there's a question that I missed on the chat, so I'm just gonna answer it quickly. Shika, the borehole water allocated to the community and school. So the borehole water is pumped into storage tanks that are suspended 9 meters high. So they just flow using gravity. They flow to the taps. The taps within the school and the one outside. So when there's sunlight, solar energy is used to pump water from the borehole into those storage tanks. So even when there's no sunlight, there's water, and the water is stored in the storage tanks, and then it flows using gravity to the taps. Then the water quality testing, because as I said that we are a science campus, there's also a nanotechnology and wastewater research center within UNISA. We took a sample of that water and we tested it for conductivity, turbidity, and pH. The pH was 7.03, which is perfect. Water is supposed to be at 7. There was zero turbidity, which is dissolved substance. So there's none of that, and it had zero conductivity, meaning there's no dissolved metals in it. So the water is actually pure, it's clean, and it's safe for the public to consume. Hopefully I addressed your question. And I think with that, I can hand over to for vote of thanks to Laura. Sorry, Natasha.
Oh, sorry, I got confused there for a bit.
Sorry about
hi,
that.
Everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natasha, and I have the privilege of serving as Vice Curator for the Global Shapers Tshwane Hub. As the Global Shapers Tshwane Hub and the entire organizing team, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude for you guys joining us today. Truly, young people are standing at the forefront of climate discussions, and the youth of the Global Shapers community, amongst others, seek to be catalysts of climate actions, amongst other change in their local communities. The Global Shapers Tshwane Hub is one of many hubs within the country and across the globe, which form part of an initiative by the World Economic Forum, where young people gather to tackle local issues with local solutions. So we have had the privilege of contributing to shaping the Tshwane community through various projects, including our Green Today, Build Tomorrow project, where we worked with low-income high schools in Mamelodi, Tshwane, where we equipped them with starting the skills of starting a food garden, as well as climate education for the students. And through that, and alongside that project, we have had the privilege of hosting and co-hosting the local conference of South Africa since 2022. So we are very grateful to continue our commitment to the positive space and the space in the climate space with the collaboration with the Climate Action Network South Africa, as well as the African Reality Climate Project in hosting and collaborated with the LCOY South Africa. Before. So this webinar really has been insightful and has laid out the foundation for the continuing of the LCOY meetings. So I'd like to give a special thanks to all our amazing panelists and all the insights that they have given and shared with us today, starting with Miriam Pandiri, who really highlighted what the LCOY is all about, and to Umi Elwa, who demanded we should a thought-provoking presentation on the youth and the role of the youth in the just transition, really highlighting the increase need for youth to bring about innovative ideas to the table, as well as the gaps that still exist that we need to fill as the young people. And to Anda Ngulu, thank you for breaking down what climate financing is and really the role of climate financing in propelling and facilitating the just transition, and our role in keeping these institutes accountable for the finances and the benefits that are supposed to come from it. And last but not least, thank you to Tshwane for your presentation on what local projects look like in the renewable energy space, as well as excellently facilitating today's webinar. Truly, we have received great knowledge from all our amazing panelists. And thank you very much to the audience and the participants for really asking insightful questions and driving dialogue that will truly inform our statement that we will collectively produce ahead of COP29. But the great news is that the conversation does not end here. We will be having our in-person LCOY event in August 2024. So please do engage with us on our social media platforms. Follow us on Instagram at LCOY_South Africa, on Twitter at LCOY South Africa, on Facebook at LCOY South Africa, as well as on LinkedIn. You can find all updates regarding LCOY on the Climate Action Network South African LinkedIn page. So from me to you, a little call to action is to reach those who cannot get a hold of this information as shared within the webinar today, that there's still a gap within reaching certain people who cannot get this information. So the in-person event is perfect for really reaching out to those who we would like to have in the group to contribute to the youth statement and conversation regarding the just transition. Thank you very much again for joining us, and we look forward to your participation and contribution to the LCOY South Africa 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And I think we're done. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I've learned a lot, and I hope that you also learned something from me, and we can continue to engage. Maybe we can meet up at the in-person event in August. I hope I can answer more of your questions and then go into in-depth and have long conversation with some of the work that we do. But with that said, thank you everyone and have a good night.